All right, hello and welcome everybody. This is Brian Olson here. I am bringing you back to yet another meetup for Trino, and today we're going to be talking with from a contractor perspective. A lot of times, people or different companies are seeking counsel in terms of how to set up their data infrastructure. And it's always really kind of cool and interesting to hear from companies that are kind of in the thick of the specific problems different companies have across the board. You know, it's not just one industry set of issues that they're working on tackling. They see quite an array of issues, and so they get a very cool and unique perspective. And so this is going to be a talk with Abzooba, and it's going to be having Bijoy and Balaram. They are consultants that will be kind of talking through a couple use cases that they've seen in the field, and particularly where they've used and applied and deployed Trino. So super excited to hear about this. Talk's called Centralized Data Lake using Trino. So definitely going to be very lakehouse driven if you couldn't take that from the talk itself. So if you're interested in hearing more about that, stay tuned. I'm going to go through a little bit of the community updates and things that we have going on. Then for those of you who are potentially new and do not know what Trino is, and or Starburst, the company that I work for, I will give you a little bit of an overview there, and then we'll jump right into the talk. So for starting out, if you're, we're going to get into what Trino is, but if you are familiar, or if you want to learn more after this talk, we're basically going to have a couple links that Anna will be pushing right here in just a little bit to the YouTube channel. So it's one link to rule them all. It will find all these links for you, so you don't have to frantically write this down. Plus, this is also recorded, so you can always find these recordings. So don't fret if I whiz by this. So one of the best places to kind of get connected, if you are really excited about these talks and learn about Trino and think it's really awesome, come join our Slack channel. We have about 7,000. Oh, hold on. Let me give you the updated count now. It's always fun to see where we're at. We are sitting pretty at around 7,795. So we're getting close to that 7,800 number. And in 200 more or so people will be hitting 8,000 people, and we're the active weekly user count is getting from the 600s and getting closer to the 700s each week. So a lot of people there to kind of help you out, get you into the community, answer your questions. Some of them are, those of us who work on Trino every day. Others are people who, have it in their architecture and do know a thing or two about it. And so a lot of very helpful and fun faces there in the Trino Slack. Trino Community Broadcast is a podcast / YouTube stream that I and Manfred Moser, one of the authors of Trino Definitive Guide, run, and we basically just talk about a lot of the cool stuff going on in the Trino community. It's also kind of another fun way that we just break down, different happenings and cool upcoming features that we want to break into. And sometimes we also bring on different businesses and people to talk about their use cases as well. But usually it's about kind of diving into the technical belly of Trino. And then for those of you that are here, you know that this is the virtual meetups. And so we have virtual meetups split up into 3 different regions, so that if you're in the Americas, EMEA, or APAC, you will be able to go to those local to you. Now, we've primarily only been focused on the Americas, but we do intend on building out EMEA and APAC here in the upcoming months too. APAC might be closer to years. But we will definitely be seeing more activity and traction in EMEA, especially as we start getting more in-person element going there. If you want to contribute to Trino, if you like writing code in, let's say Java or Python, or we have quite a few other arrays like Go, different clients that particularly talk to them. And primarily Trino is written in Java. If you are fancying any of those types of languages, check out trino.io/development. And we have a lot of ways that you can get involved in the community there. There's also, ways to get involved if you don't write code. If you want to write blogs about using Trino, let's say you're a data scientist and you don't necessarily write Java or anything like that, but you've used Trino and you've thought it was just super fast and super slick, you can write a blog for us. You can also write documentation if you use Trino especially. And so you can check out the trino.io/blog. You can also go into the main repo and go into the docs section, and we have all sorts of information on how to contribute documentation. So definitely that's a lot of cool ways to get involved in the community. And then we also have Trino Forum. Just another kind of thing to mention is, a lot of the things that we talk about in Slack, sometimes we try to, we have that beautiful knowledge there, but then getting it available to people who are just searching in Google, a lot of times we want to also have this kind of complement to that, which is the forum. And this basically is having very similar conversations that you have in Slack, but then we basically kind of clean it up and make it somewhat of a knowledge repository that people can search and find. It's kind of a very living, breathing FAQ type place. So definitely check out Trino Forum as well. It's trinoforum.org. And then exciting things to talk about. So Trino Summit is coming this year. This is the big summit. We did have Cinco de Trino back in May 5th. And so Trino Summit this year will be November 10th. We're holding it in person in San Francisco from 9 a.m. to 5 p.m. And then there's also going to be like a two-hour happy hour for those of you in person. And then we also, extend this out to people virtually as well. So definitely go register for that at starburst.io/info/Trino Summit. And also that link will be out there with the link that we sent you all. For coming today, if you haven't gotten a Trino shirt yet, you can also go to the link that Anna's signing up or showing right there. So again, that'll be in the YouTube comments. And so sign up for that t-shirt and get you some Trino swag. It's a cute little bunny, our favorite Commander Bun. He's sitting back here looking over my shoulder right now, as you can see, making sure that I'm not screwing anything up for the meetup today. So, okay, so what happens if you enjoy this talk and you want to ask us questions after this? So a couple things you can do. One is you can interactively ask questions live here on YouTube chat, and I'll bring up your thing. So for instance, Damon just said hi to us. So hi, Damon. Thanks for joining from Canada. Longtime listener, and he's always one of our favorite fans to have on both Trino community broadcasts and on the Trino meetups. So nice having you back here, Damon. And then so I can always bring your question up just like that. And if you have any questions during the presentation, and then we can answer that live for you here. Now, if something comes to you after the show and you want to ask questions, again, please go onto the Trino Slack, ask the questions there. You can find me at Brian Olson. Just find me in there, and I'm all over the Slack channel, so you can just message me directly or message in the dev channel or troubleshooting channels if you have any questions there, or beginner channel. And so that's definitely a good place to go. You can also follow us on Twitter at TrinoDB. And finally, see if I can pull up some of the banners things. So definitely, if you are excited about the project and you want to remember where it is later in the future, give us a star on github.com/TrinoDB/Trino. That is the main repository that houses Trino. And so that is definitely ways to kind of keep up with us and learn more about Trino and ask questions if you have them. So I'm going to go into a little thing of now. I kind of promised you all, if you're beginners or if you haven't heard of Trino before, maybe you do a lot on Python, or you use Spark, or some other type of query engine. I want to give you a little bit of a background of what Trino is, and then we can also talk a little bit about my company, Starburst. So Trino is a distributed SQL query engine. It's massively parallel, and that's the whole MPP SQL query engine part of it. It's incredibly high performance. It was written from the ground up at Facebook back in 2012 because basically there was a lot of issues with latency with Hive. So those of you, probably that's another query engine that a lot of you are probably on or coming from if you've recently changed over. So this is essentially, at first, Trino was created to basically be a Hive replacement, not replacing the storage part, or actually even the kind of metadata part of it. Is actually just replacing the runtime, so that kind of MapReduce kind of DAG type stuff, where you were just like incredibly slow mappers, reducers, and things taking forever, a lot of spin up, spin down times and things like that. And then everything had to constantly get persisted back to disk in the middle. And so this was aiming to kind of alleviate that, keeping first everything in memory and then trying to do everything in parallel. So really this aim to solve that and try to not only split things down on cross nodes with distributed querying, but also try to do it very complicated, like basically like generating these codes based on the exact query that's being generated, or that was being written in SQL, that basically gets generated on runtime and executes every single time you run a new query in Trino. And so this actually gives you a very customized performance and optimizations around the JVM. So high performance MPP SQL query engine. It's in ANSI SQL. So this is, again, kind of varying away from some of the issues that Hive had. Hive had its own kind of custom query language. And so there was a lot of things that didn't port well with other SQL query engines, like, let's say, Postgres, that again, you'd want to be able to kind of pick up and move some of these queries that maybe you're running directly in Postgres or something like that. Well, you're not really able to do that across different systems. You have to actually figure out how to do that specifically in Hive versus anything else. And so that was another kind of benefit of Trino. From the beginning, the founders, Martin, Dane, and David, they made this a very community-driven project, and always wanted it to be open source so that it wouldn't just live in Facebook and die in Facebook. They wanted this to be something that multiple companies and multiple different industries and individuals could take advantage of. Separation of compute and storage, that's kind of, at this point, it was kind of a given to kind of have that type of abstraction, because Hadoop had really pushed that. But the cool part about Trino, in comparison to what Hive and all the other SQL on Hadoop things that we're doing, is Trino started to add in this layer called the SPI layer that allowed us to communicate to a lot of other databases. So it was just basically an interface that could get set up to talk to, let's say, MySQL, or let's say to talk, and that maybe isn't super interesting in itself. It's a SQL to SQL engine. But then what about NoSQL engines like Elasticsearch or MongoDB? Or then what about, so we are already able to talk to like Hive and stuff like that. But what about real-time systems like Pinot and Druid and things like that? So now Trino is actually this federated query engine that's able to actually do a join, let's say, over some table that's sitting in Elasticsearch with another table that's sitting in data lake. So this is really exciting. And then now we actually have facilities like a Helm chart, so that you can deploy on Kubernetes, you can deploy on-prem, you can deploy in the cloud. And so that's really why we get really excited around Trino, is that there's a lot of pain that it kind of alleviates and resolves. It's super fast. It's a good alternative to Hive and even other kind of older generation query engines. And so really, really, really cool stuff. So then what is Starburst? So basically Starburst, like many open source systems, there are companies that build on top of these open source systems. And so we are building on top of Trino to basically, initially Starburst was aiming to basically add a enterprise version of Trino. And so it was primarily focused on how do we make sure that we can just sell support and maybe build a couple extra, tools and features around Trino. That's scaled up a lot. There's newer connectors, enterprise connectors that Starburst has added. But then more recently, we've veered into making a more cloud native technology called Starburst Galaxy, which is just SaaS version of Galaxy that you can deploy. And Galaxy starting out will just be kind of the easy button push version of deploying Trino, something that basically just has Trino running for you in the background, and you can just kind of configure it and be done. But there's a lot more of where that will end up leading to in terms of being able to apply governance scenarios, things like that, and being able to build out more kind of data discovery tools and all sorts of really cool and interesting ways that, let's say if you were having a very complicated data lakehouse architecture, you needed to kind of tame the vast amount of tables and data and things that all these different people, all these different teams are putting into your system. This is going to provide not only just the query engine capabilities, but also the data governance and trying to basically maintain the beast. So I've well gone over my 15 minutes and I don't want to take too much time here, but in essence, that is what Trino and Starburst bring to you. And so without further ado, I'd like to bring on Bijoy and Balaram. Let me see if I can stop sharing my screen and bring on Bijoy. Hi, Bijoy.
Yes, can you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you.
All right, let me switch to, let me know once you guys can see my slides.
Yep, I'll let you know. I'll bring on you, Balaram, as well. And we see your slides now, Bijoy. So go ahead, and if you feel like there's a little StreamYard is sharing your screen, you can click hide on that. So that way that's out of the way. And then feel free to take it away and tell us about all these really super interesting, cool use cases that you're all seeing at Abzooba.
Thank you, Brian, for having us here today. Hi, everyone. My name is Bijoy. Today, we're going to talk about the centralized data lake using Trino and Starburst. Just to say a little bit about the company, I work for Abzooba. Abzooba is a UST company, and UST Global is a digital transformation company that works with their customers, which are mostly Fortune 100, Fortune 500 customers, and enable their data and analytics digital transformation. And we are, next slide, and Abzooba is part of this company, and we have 4 different areas that we work with our customers. So the area that I focus mostly is big data and cloud engineering, and where we enable our customers to build, deploy some of their complex solutions in that space. And then we also have a data science area, and also a data strategy and business analytics area. I'm sorry, business intelligence area, where we integrate some of the offerings that we make, and we mesh it for giving them more insight and value. Now, apart from that, we also have a platform, it's called Espresso.ai, which is basically an artificial intelligence and machine learning lifecycle management platform, where actually it's integrated set of frameworks and accelerators to help data scientists build cognitive solutions. Normally, what it is that it has enabling from build, deploy, and operate, and the whole lifecycle is taken care of using these accelerators. So a little bit about myself here. So as I said, I had the big data and cloud engineering at Abzooba, and I have around 20 plus years of experience. And when I started, I started writing adapters for enterprise clients or enterprise applications before furthering my way into big data and cloud. And also, consequently, I was a co-founder for a company, Jaloni Inc., a data ops company that got acquired by Truist Bank. They, in fact, acquired the Arena Data Platform as part of it. And Truist Bank is SunTrust Bank. As some of you know, it's formerly called SunTrust, sixth largest bank. And apart from that, I am a practicing faculty at the University of Pacific in San Francisco here, in the Department of Computer Science Engineering, where I take great classes for MS Data Science students. With that, I'll let Balram, my colleague here, to introduce briefly.
Hey everyone, this is Balram. So my name is Balram Raju. So I've been working in primarily big data space and cloud for close to 12 years now. And after that, in the last 7 years, I've been working as cloud engineer. And primarily what I do for Abzooba and all the clients is I primarily give them solutions. So the main job is to come up with the right solution. And obviously that requires a lot of research and POCs and things like that. So that's me. And back to Bijoy.
Thanks, Balram. All right. So today, what we're going to talk is about one of our customers, who is one of the leading food and beverages company. Is a multinational, and where we actually introduced them to Presto. That was almost 2.5 years back, when we went with Starburst, and how we kind of executed and what we are doing till date, and the transition that has happened until now. And Balram and me both were part of the journey, and Balram has been there before that, and still he is actually instrumental in handling some of those changes that's happening now. Like any other enterprises, it was a pre-Starburst state, what it was. They had disparate data systems, like some of the data systems that they had, like the ADLS blob, the Teradata of the world, the SQL of the world, and Oracle, and HDI. HDI meaning, so it's the insights. So now, having said that, as you know, during 2010 onwards until another 5-6 years, there was a huge revolution of Hadoop being part of the ecosystem. So, like any other enterprise, big institutions, so this company also started investing in the Hadoop ecosystem. But as and when they were starting to bring their data from some of their legacy databases or data systems into the HDFS file system, they started to realize that things were getting much more challenging for them. First thing is that they are finding that reporting was difficult and slow. And it became like their previous traditional systems, where they had this batch reporting servers from where they used to take up the reports after every 12 hours, run it, and then present it to the business. Next was that, again, they had this, therefore the time for business insight was a business challenge for them. While they invested the money to make it more faster, time and again, it was more slower than expected. So live reporting is one. It's very difficult, very slow, and it did not make what they're thinking. So they're still thinking what to do. Now, as this ecosystem evolved, they were told, okay, let's use Hive and Spark for ETL purposes, right? And they started, going deeper and trying to run all these jobs. And eventually, it's still the slow performing for analytics, because we'll come to another slide where it says why. So it was slow for performing some of the analytics that they were running, and then and there are also high costs associated with this analytics. So they realized that the compute was high. Cost was high because they used to run compute on these machines, which are different, several cores of machine they purchased. So with that, what happened, another challenge, the business challenge, was that the cross-data pollination was not happening, because the data were actually in silos, as we know. They had, on ADLS, like when they just moved, they're just starting an effort to ADLS. And then they had Teradata, which is, again, we know, how Teradata was, evolving and from Hadoop. And HDN was not part of Teradata for them, actually. And they had SQL, and they had Oracle, and then they had SAPs, and also top of it they had the different reporting applications like the Tableau of the world, and they have the cataloging tool like Alation they use, and then they also use some workflow orchestration vendors like InfoWorks to do all this stuff. So this was a big challenge for them. So now that this into the traditional ecosystem, right? Before the performance was impacting. For example, the SD Insight and Hive was very expensive and very slow in performance in terms of when they try to run the queries, because when there more and more Hive queries were there, and their systems were getting, and the only solution people or they were getting was from the vendors was, okay, you know what, you know, to up your core, get more machines, put more, you know, power into it. And also when they started to run the Spark jobs, it was slow for high concurrent analytical query performance, meaning when they're trying to run concurrently the Spark jobs, it slowed down the query performance to run the analytical engines. And again, that again, of course, result was live reporting, difficult and slow, as we already explained. Having gone there, the cost was another thing. HD Insight and Hive annual costs were starting to rise and rise. So it was increasing because they had to procure more infra, and they have to spend more in terms of performance. Even the performance, they had to get more cost into the hardware as well, and then get more servers to get the license costs. Now, at that point, that is when we kind of met them, and that is when we went in and we looked at it, and then I had folks from Starburst. So it was like, you know, hey, what's the problem and how we can, you know, help you guys? But they were kind enough to give us, you know, why don't we try some small POC, because we're already doing a migration effort from Azure ADLS, and then we can see whether we want to proceed or not. So with that, with Starburst and ADLS, we did a POC and ran some queries, and we did some comparative analysis, and we decided, you know, that when we take the hardware and software, the cost comes out reasonably less than what they were running. And with that onwards, we started to, they started to kind of again think about whether we should bring it around, because they're already trying to do a few more other POCs, other technologies. Now, another thing was that they was looking for the challenge they had was the inability to access all the data that they were talking about. For example, Hive for the Hadoop distributions were not an option for the data sources, because that is how they go in and then they kind of, Hive normally works best when you have a different set of Hadoop distributions. And then also there is no way of joining the disparate data sources. Like how do you have these data sources connect to each other, talk to each other, or get the data out of each other and mesh it together, right? So that, and especially when these are like, production systems, and they didn't want to kind of mess it out without unnecessarily putting additional thing and then trying things which are not their share of. And lastly, the duplication of data and the ETL jobs to get the data in one location. They could, apparently, what they used to run several ETL jobs, right, in each of those data sources and get the data and then put it in a repository and then perhaps run those analytics. But the problem was this: when you run these ETL jobs, you are also processing some of the unwanted data. For example, when you have these different kind of tables you are joining, different set of schemas that you are talking about, then some of the data actually you don't need some redundant data. You are actually pulling in and again putting it in a location where actually is data duplication or happening, right? And that is actually you don't need it perhaps for some of the analytic engines. So that was again a big hurdle for them. So how it was impacting the business before? So first was the business analysis, and the key line of businesses are not productive, and they were starting to complain. You know what? This is not working. We moved from like a traditional to a Hadoop environment or in newer environment, but we are still seeing challenges. So the reason they're saying it's technology, it's nothing to do with us. And then another challenge was that the real-time analytics were more challenging and getting much more hard to be performed. And it was obvious because of reasons that we already talked about, where they were trying to execute jobs which were taking much more time and also underperforming. And as a result, it was taking time to market because of these bottlenecks. And as a result, the businesses had challenges to kind of cover up some of the competitiveness or the competitors they had. And it was also highly risk for them because there are growing number of complaints and their poor customer experience from the distribution level to the retailers. There are a lot of pushback. Things are they're not getting proper insights and not getting enough kind of information to ensure that the right kind of metadata or the data is being pulled out to get the real picture of what's happening and how we can get ahead with this. And remember, in this this kind of business where you have FNDCs are actually very competitive. Their line of margin is very competitive. Therefore, this was a very challenging thing for them. And as such, When we went in, then we kind of had this discussion as what exactly we wanted to achieve, by bringing in Trino Starburst. So a few things that they put us forward. It was, well, first the goal, how to improve the customer experience, because for that, the business outcomes they were looking for, to make data more readily available. That is a must, and that is what they have been, trying to spend for, and that's what they've been promised before. And they were little, maybe whether we can do that or not, and whether Trino can bring that, or at that time, Express, of course, can bring that or not. Second was to reduce the technology cost, but not at compromising at the query performance. So they wanted a kind of a platform or a technology where we need the query performance, but not at the cost of because we reduce the technology cost, it doesn't mean that we'll have to kind of compromise on that. So, but definitely they did want to reduce it because their costs were so high. And for that, the outcome was that so that will enable them to make some smarter business decisions, right? And lastly, they were also considering how do you access data no matter where it sits. That is something that they were not sure about it, because remember, they had all these data silos, and they used to run all these jobs and put the data in a repository, and from which they call it data lake, right? And from there, they used to kind of try to pull this data and from the reports, and then each of these applications or each of these tools have their own separate set of issues that they need to cover, right? And therefore, they wanted the ability to create new analytics services so that they could drive revenue for each of the lines of businesses. So therefore, we went in, and then we thought that could be the ideal solution, because we knew that few things that they asked that first was that we knew that Trino had this external table performance, which was pretty clear to us, and we were expecting that would be something that at 10x performance. We saw it in our POC, and our team was already playing with Trino, and we had some success rates. And then another thing was they wanted the unified query. So if the Trino had this whole unified query engine concept that we knew, so we kind of visioned that this could be one thing, because the query federation is something that was could work in their favor, because that is something where all the NC SQL form help kind of take the SQL from any other connectors, right? So with all the different connectors they was starting to work on, we thought that would be a right fit. And also with very minimal changes, you could write this SQL queries, right? And that was an advantage. So with that, we went in, and then we said that yes, that could be one of the reasons that we perhaps can come in and show you how we can build up and move forward. With that, we started the POC, and then I think after that we were successful, and eventually we hit some milestones that they wanted, and some of these business outcomes we were able to validate it with them. And with that, I think how we did it and what we did, I'll ask Balram to share more insight into the architecture, a little bit of it, whatever we can, and then share some of the views how we have been doing it. So take it away, Balram. Before that, is there any questions if anyone has? Please feel free to kind of stop me or ask. I forgot to ask that. If not, you can also end the session. We can talk about it.
Yeah, thanks, Vijay. And if you can go to the next slide. So first thing I want to mention is the POC that Vijay was mentioning, right? So there are certain things we wanted to solve, like with the goals that we had for the client, right? So one of the big ones was because at 2019, they were using HD Insight. So one of the challenges with HD Insight back then was you can scale up the cluster, but when you try to scale down, the jobs get evicted. So it can lead to any job failures, and that's not something you want in a production system, right? So the other thing is when we did the POC, what we found was that given the same hardware for both Presto at that time, now Trino, and Hive, the performance was like 80% faster. So that means you're spending 80% less money for the hardware, because on cloud you end up paying for everything that you use, right? So by looking at these two things that they were facing, then we started, kind of overcoming and understanding what the POC will contain. And what we also, one of the other advantages that Trino has is you can build multiple catalogs. So for example, what like Vijay mentioned, there were a lot of silos. So every project or every sector had their own set of, HT Insight cluster. So by using Trino, we were able to bring all of those catalogs or meta stores into one location by catalogs, right? So that way, what it allows us to do is now, although the data is in different being ingested by different projects, different teams, it's all available in one place. So that way, it was like a POC with a real life scenario which could help business build on. So after we did the successful POC, we came up with this new architecture that we currently implemented last year. And with that being said, let's go into this architecture that we see. So now in this architecture, what we have done is we use, you can see we ingest data from different sources like SQL Server, API, SAP, Oracle, and Teradata, and so on, right? But the idea was when we do the ingestion, we can use different kinds of tools, right? Like for example, you see here Spark being used, ADF, Azure Data Factory being used. And also we have other tools like which I mentioned, InfoWorks, and also we have Trifacta and some other tools, right? But the idea was, as long as that tool can use the meta store that we publish, so that means even though there are different kinds of teams using different kinds of tools, we can maintain the metadata as a central location, right? So that being said, then that allows us to have different teams use even different storage accounts, but still Trino can read the data. So if you see, what we built was a data lake, like a centralized data lake, and we used Spark for ingestion, and we have used ADF and other things. But they all write back to this metastore that you see here, right on the top. And that allows us to have one consumption layer, which is our Trino. So now what this solves is a bunch of issues that we had, right? And that allows us to, Vijay, if you can go to the next slide, some of the pain points that we had were resolved using Trino in this format. Vijay? Yeah. So if you see here, I've just mentioned a few, I'll go through them. So being a true data lake means you can have different teams share their data with other teams without having to probably move the data, right? That's the whole idea of data lake, right? So that was a big miss which we had with the old HT Insight systems. So that being said, we were pretty happy with what Trino could help us in that. And then the cost, right? Like I was mentioning, because it is 80% faster in terms of completing the query, now the 80% cost also goes down because we're talking about the same hardware, right? And then there is Ranger-based access control. And in 2019 with HT Insight, there was only one way to control access on HT Insight called the domain join, which had a lot of, first of all, the setting up was a nightmare. And then, it had a lot of issues within, and how would you, differentiate one user from another? You would have to connect different things. But with the help of Ranger access control on Trino, it makes it very easy, unlike how we do in Hive. It's very, very similar, and it makes it very, very easy. And that being said, now we also, kind of got the performance that we were looking for. So once we got that, like I said, once we started, doing the POC with actual business users, they were also really impressed, and we were able to bring down some of the clusters that were just used for consumption back then. And that was by itself a big gain for Trino, because that means we were able to not, spin up new clusters just because somebody has a use case. We were able to just leverage Presto or Trino in this case, right? Without having to start new hardware. So that was a big win. And then once we started going into the actual architecture, what we found was, because Trino is built on AKS platform, we were having a lot of advantages in terms of scaling up and scaling down. And one of the, I was telling you, right, HT Insight has one of the drawbacks: it can't scale down. So with AKS, we found that we were able to scale up and scale down almost by the minute based on, let's say, CPU consumption and memory on that cluster, right? So that was a big win, because that means it saves on both the hardware cost and also some of the software cost, right? And then the last two changes that I'm talking about, pain points, are more recent changes. So maybe 3 months ago. So one of the big one was we started doing a blue-green approach for all our updates and patches. So what that allows us to do is we can have two systems running always in parallel, and we can apply the patch to one and kind of flip between them. So that gave us the advantage that there would be a zero downtime, and this gives much more kind of a easy showcase for all our change management, right? So because if there is zero downtime, change management is usually it's easier to convince them, right? And that being said, the last pain point that we were able to address was like federated queries, right? We talked about. So some of the challenges with federated queries is Presto may be really fast, but doesn't mean the federated system like Oracle or SQL Server is fast enough to get the data, right? So by using materialized views and also some form of caching within Trino, we were able to leverage, kind of Trino in a much better way. That let's say if the table is refreshed once a day, we would cache the table or create a materialized view once a day, and that means that the rest of the day when the queries come in, you don't even hit the actual system, right? So that one reduces the load on the system which is already in strain, like Teradata and Oracle and other systems. And then also it gives great performance because everything is in Trino right now, right? So those are some of the things, and I give it back to Vijay.
Yeah. Yeah, thanks, Balram. So I think we, but before we have to Q&A, so quickly, so what we realized that, Trino being a single consumption layer, so biggest advantage that we see was the query federation of it, where, we could access data from multiple systems within a single query. And that is one of the biggest advantage that we see that has been in place. And also the speed and scale at which we could, do that, right? Now, before and just quickly, I just wanted to say that we talking about performance, right? We actually did recently. We tried to do some performance estimation, taking a Hive table with around 187 million records, and a SQL table with around 50,000 records. And what we found that the performance and with Trino was in it, when you did a count, it's distinct. It was pretty fast compared to some of the existing technologies that we're using, like. Not the Databricks SQL as well, but the Databricks Spark when they're trying to run it, right? And also trying to do a where, which was like almost similar, but the biggest difference we saw when we do some join windows, which is significantly faster and much more, as the volume of data records grew, the performance of Trino was much more, stable. In
Yeah, that is true, Vijay. So even when we did the POC back then, right, the average percentage of gain was 80%. So that's quite a lot, actually.
Yeah, and then just to also inform that we use the same number of cores, and 4 cores, I think, and then also the memory that we use around 14 GB for it. So it was like 1:1 kind of performance evolution that we have done. So overall, it has so far been a great kind of experience for us, especially in the kind of environment and kind of response time that they're looking for from us. So with that, I think I'm good enough. If there's any questions from anybody, we can answer here.
Hey, thanks, Vijay and Balaram. That was awesome. I am really just interested to kind of understand a little more. So everything being on Azure, this is actually maybe not super common from, like, I guess, when you look at the percentages about who uses which cloud, a lot of times you're seeing anything from generally Amazon. I think Azure kind of comes in second place, and then it's kind of Google after that. And so the amount of times that we see Azure is much more rare. And so I'm curious to know kind of what your experiences was. And this is my selfish kind of need to know, but from a documentation perspective, from a community perspective, how hard was it to kind of ramp up the fact that this was on Azure?
Yeah, I mean, it's not just because it's Azure, but AWS also will have this concern is because all the big companies have their own info security and certain restrictions, right? They
Yeah.
do not allow you to use like a public repo, right? They
Yep.
would want you to have a, I mean, in Azure, it's called Azure Container Service, right? ACR registry. So things like that. These are not really. I don't think we faced any challenges. It was more, networking delays, like network security group, creating those kind of things in an organization like that takes around 3 weeks.
Yep.
There were some delays, but I wouldn't say really we hit a roadblock. But other than that, because it's all Kubernetes, it was pretty straightforward, and the way the Trino team helped us, I think it was pretty fast.
Yeah, awesome. And was there anything out of the box missing from like the Azure support that we needed to implement before you could actually like fulfill this particular customer's needs?
Yeah, so like I was saying, right? So back then, 2019, when they were on HT Insight, one of the biggest challenge was we could scale up, but we couldn't scale down, right?
Yeah,
Because
yeah.
it failed on jobs. So that was one of the big. I don't think that issue is there in AWS. I'm not 100% sure because I worked on AWS quite some time before I worked on Azure. So I'm not very sure if that's kind of a unique challenge for Azure. So may not exist in other cloud providers. And because if you're talking about GCP, GCP encourages GKE, right, like more Kubernetes services, and it becomes more native in those kind of clouds, right? So and I guess the Kubernetes experience in Azure has been good. I think one of the things that I would like to see is more serverless Kubernetes kind of a service. I don't think that's I don't think it's coming anytime soon, but because when you scale up, when you're doing by steps, you tend to hit some kind of scaling issues, right?
Yeah, and I feel like you're still, despite Kubernetes kind of having a lot of automation, you still have to manage that automation as well.
Correct.
And so I think it's kind of interesting that you would say that, because like I feel like that would be very like something for all the cloud providers to actually invest into, but that would also kind of eat away at some of the SaaS, because that's, I think, one of the biggest opportunities that SaaS brings along, right? Is that, okay, there's going to be some vendor that manages this for you. But if you do that, then you ultimately is kind of like the ultimate way to empower open source projects. But also it will give a lot of competitive edge that will have to go, it'll basically make SaaS services have to kind of step their game up.
Yeah, that is empowerment. That exactly that's the correct term you're using, Brian, because that has to happen, because at the end of the day, it is the organization that have to support and maintain whatever the community is providing, right? Yes, there is a community, but in typically in enterprise kind of environment, there is restriction still within them, right? So they take the community version and they definitely tweak and they give back whatever they can, but some of them they try to fork out of it and build something that's customizable at their end. So that is always the case.
Cool. And so you primarily only use Delta Lake at this point. Have you all ever this particular customer used Delta Lake? Do you all ever use Iceberg? And what are the kind of reasons why you all kind of go back and forth between one or the other? If you do,
if you look at the architecture, right? If you see, our raw layer tends to be in Avro format because it can be schema evolution, right? So today we get 10 columns, tomorrow we get 11. We should not break the raw layer, right? And then our hub layer is in Parquet format because it has all the columnar benefits. But our final, or the gold layer, what people like to call it, is more Delta format because of the transaction capabilities and things like that, right?
Sure.
That being said, something I've been testing on the back end is Trino performs really well with ORC format. Right?
Yeah.
And what I've seen is the difference is quite a bit, actually.
Yeah.
And it's slowly coming up. So Delta is also performing better as we go along. So there has been a lot of updates in the last couple of years from 2019 till now. that Trino has been catching up really fast. Like for example, especially with Delta format and Iceberg, I cannot really go into details because I haven't really totally tested it, right? But I've heard really good things about it, and I maybe next time, yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. No. I just know it was this one in particular that only used Delta, and if you guys have used Iceberg before, but yeah. Okay. So, and with Delta, is it primarily the transaction capabilities, or are there governance capabilities, other governance capabilities like masking, things like that, or other type of security
Not
features?
really. So we use just the transaction part and also some of the other capabilities like kind of a time travel and things like that. So what that allows us to do is if we have had situations where somebody accidentally made a wrong entry or something, we can always go back to an older version of the data, right? Yeah.
Yeah. And then this was so this was starting back in the year 2019, but is this I'm not sure if this is still ongoing, but I do spy the like 2 Spark kind of areas where you're kind of doing the transformations internally using Spark. And I'm curious if you all have heard of like the fault tolerance execution mode of Trino that just landed earlier this year.
Yeah, I haven't really explored that.
Okay.
But yeah, so Tom from Trino keeps me updated, and we always discuss the new features. But because of all the things going on, we don't get to kind of test all of them, right?
Gotcha. Yeah, so like that's definitely one I recommend to look into, and I'm curious, especially with the broad spectrum that you all get to see. There are some cases where Spark still makes sense, and then there's other times where it's starting to make more sense with these new fault tolerance capabilities. Usually, it can be kind of a scale thing, but it's kind of like a trade-off and scale thing. But this gets back to now that we have fault tolerance capabilities in Trino, where you can just kind of turn that on. You have some clusters that may be dedicated more to Spark-like jobs or more kind of batch query jobs, and then you have kind of other ones that meet still a certain scale. These are much higher scales that still is kind of out of the reach or realm of Trino. That you might still want to keep on Spark, but it is definitely a much more a faster speed kind of that you get for like jobs that kind of lie in this.
What you're saying is valid because right now what we use is a big Trino cluster and use it only for consumption, right? Yes, like you said, if we find that fault tolerance really helps us in performing some of the activities between hub and standard layer, right? Where mostly it is, standardizing the data. I mean, mostly it's SQL, sometimes it's Python. But if we are able to do that using something like Trino, yes, I think that definitely makes sense.
Yeah, especially from a speed ups perspective.
Yes, that is the key actually. You're right. And then also remember that some of this data that we are using here for some ML and AI kind of applications as well, right? So that is the one area that normally we haven't shown it here, but yes, that's under part of the equation. So putting that fault tolerant layer and train of Trino definitely will perhaps add more value because we'll have to check to it, right?
Sure, exactly. So until I like POC is one thing, after POC, you start applying a real use case. And once it makes sense, then a light bulb kind of glows, right? So you say, okay, I can start using it for most of the things that I'm doing, right? So I haven't had that moment yet.
Yeah, definitely. I know. I definitely think we have to prove ourselves in that particular domain in that area before people can really start adopting Trino more than just a kind of this area you have here, like the SQL layer. But yeah, I think that's definitely something I'm curious if we should check in on down the road. After if you guys do get a chance to check that out, reach out to me for sure.
I mean, right now what I think we are trying to do is try to leverage most of the benefits that Trino gives. For example, the ANC SQL layer, right? SQL compliant query engine. So that works pretty well with Power BI or R or Tableau, right? And that's first and many others, right? So that is one of the key ingredients that is kind of helping in the consumption side of the data. I think the business is actually liking it, right? So as and when it gets more ingrained into their ecosystem, right, it will be much more easier to pull and then show them some more as it evolves, right? Trino is evolving as we see.
Yep.
As long as you don't make it very heavy, that's what I hope the community keeps track of. That doesn't make it very heavy, so that at some point it collapses. We don't want that. We want to how we can keep it still fairly lighter, in which enterprise.
Focused. Yeah.
That's the whole point. Otherwise, sometimes we forget, and as a community, we go in, we put a lot of code, we chuck it in, and we try to, and it becomes like a megalith, right? And it becomes an issue.
Yeah.
You know what? I don't want so many features. Why are we doing it, right? So as long as we can keep that little lean, and I'm not saying lean means very lean, but to the point where it can add value assets to the business as well as the technology that we are trying to provide, and that will be a win-win for the community as well as for.
Yeah, our concern too was on the fault tolerance. It was a long debate to even consider something like that, and the idea that it can just be a mode that can be turned on or off, and it's kind of opt-in. We already have plenty of people that are utilizing multiple clusters of Trino to either scale or kind of do load balancing type measures across different things. But then to kind of apply that same methodology, we thought, okay, well, you're able to kind of turn this on optionally and still run in the original mode, right? It's not going to be too much. It's not going to be kind of taking away from any of the other use cases if we make it architected in that way. And that was kind of the idea there. But every kind of feature add, there's a lot that we're saying no to, and it takes a while for those things to kind of pass the inspection test of all these all the maintainers on the project.
No, that's true. Because see, when we moved from Presto to Trino, right? Remember, we had this challenge of all the folders being renamed again to Trino, right? Because of the legal thing, whatever, right?
Yeah.
So that was the first hurdle that we moved, because this was one of the customers who evolved Trino from Presto, right?
Yep.
So that was the thing. So now I think going forward it will be much more easier once that is all fast and forgotten, right? So
and we got to do a couple of the changes that they had wanted to do for years, and there was like, well, we're already renaming and breaking everything anyways, so we even did a layer down of organization between plugins and docs and things like that.
Right.
So we're kind of running low on time, but I want to say again, thanks for joining Bijoy and Balaram. How do people kind of find more about Abzooba? And kind of how can people kind of get in contact with you if they have any questions?
Oh, sure. And just I think we are abzooba.com if you go, and I think our information is, maybe I'm not sure if it's on this slide deck, but yeah, I mean, you just go to our website, and then you find us on LinkedIn, Bijoy Bora, my name is, and Balaram is there, and or send out to Abzooba, just ping us.
Yeah. Everything you need to add is balram.raju@abzooba or Bijoy Bora at
Yeah,
Abzooba.
Bijoy, the first name dot last name at abzooba.com. Yeah, and balram.raju@abzooba.com.
Perfect. And I just entered the website into the comments. So look in the comments if you're watching this later to find out more about Abzooba. And again, thanks for that wonderful presentation. We're really excited to see hopefully a couple more as we start doing more in person. We can hear about your adventures in fault tolerance execution mode with Trino.
Thank you, and we look forward to see some of you in the meet in November 10th in San Francisco.
Yep, definitely. Oh yeah, will you all be at the Trino Summit?
I've been there. Yes.
Yeah,
okay.
I live in Dallas, so I try to come.
All right. Well, Bijoy, come find me at the front in between one of the talks at some point. Okay. All right. I'll see you all there, and take care.
Take care. Thank you.